Okay, and Liz and Rachel, you both have access as co-hosts if other people are in the waiting room and I miss it. Please let them in. Welcome everyone to, I don't even know what number this is, but our April Pyramid Model Practice Lunch and Learn webinar offering. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kate Sweeney. I'm with UConn's Peak team, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Liz Hoy, Liz Chambers, and Rachel Bonata as well, who you'll hear from in just a little bit. Our topic today is focusing on teaching problem-solving skills. For those of you that have joined us previously, thank you for being here. For those of you that this is your first time, our attempt is just to have an hour every month to take one topic within this large umbrella of pyramid practices and have a little bit of time on it so that those of you that are new to pyramid can learn it in a piecemeal way. Those of you that are doing it and would like resources to support those in your community and work have some additional tools to do that as well. So we'll get started. Just want to acknowledge that all of this work is done through funding and partnership with the Office of Early Childhood, who has long been committed to the pyramid model throughout the state of Connecticut. And our team is within the Innovations Institute at the School of Social Work within UConn. Logistically, wanted to share we've heard some responses and heard the need for there to be some evening offerings and some offerings specifically within Spanish language for these webinars. We've had live translation previously, and that was supported by OEC, and we're grateful to them for that. But it often, had people in different rooms based on language and didn't offer the opportunity to discuss and collaborate and hear responses to questions. So we have two of our family child care pyramid model coaches that have leaned into this process with us. And we're going to be offering these webinars now 3 times a month. So we have our standing noon, you come over lunch and discuss a topic of pyramid with us that our team will continue to support. And then next Wednesday, the 29th, from 6:30 to 7:30, it will be the same content will be offered in Spanish. And then Monday the 4th, so the following week, same time from 6:30 to 7:30, it will be offered in English. And again, our attempt there is to acknowledge that childcare and educators are a difficult bunch to schedule with. Often you're called into, more proximate or calling things within children in the classroom, and that's where you should be as needed. So wanting to offer some flexibility in your opportunity to engage within this content. And we'll provide links to those resources or to those registration opportunities as well. Okay, setting the stage for our objectives for our time today. So we're delving into problem solving skills and how that's such a pivotal part of the pyramid model. So our goal is by the end of this session or by the end of this hour, you'll walk away with some confidence in explaining why early problem solving skills are foundational to social and emotional development, school readiness, and long-term outcomes, to identify developmentally appropriate problem-solving strategies for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, and get a sense of, how do infants problem solve and what's age appropriate for kids that are getting ready to go into kindergarten. To walk away with some concrete strategies to model and teach simple and explicit problem-solving steps, to use universal supports and coaching language in everyday routines with kids and also with families and other adults to scaffold their problem solving skills. So this idea of, intentional teaching and practice. And then we'll also discuss, as we do on every pyramid topic, how this work also applies to our partnership with families and caregivers to support them within home and community routines and settings. So globally, over the next 60 minutes, we'll want you to walk away from this discussion, buying into the idea that you can effectively teach and practice problem-solving skills with young children and their families. And that, again, it's something that needs to be taught. A few of you did this already, but want to invite you to sign in via the chat with your name and the age of children that you work with. And we always ask a a question relevant to the topic. So this one focuses on problem solving. What problems that need solving do young children struggle with most often in your view of the work? We'll give you a few minutes to do that and would love to invite Liz or Rachel to read the chat as folks participate.
We have Michelle Jones from North Carolina signing
Oh,
in the chat.
hello, North
Welcome,
Carolina.
Michelle. I used to be in North Carolina as well. Ronnie Stratton from Granbury. Sharing toys. Stephanie says sharing toys is a
Mm.
common problem. Emotional regulation, self-regulation, throwing toys and hitting. Got some folks working from birth to 5, some from 3 to 5, 3 to 6.
Great. Well, thank you all. And we want this time and content to be useful to you. We're actually going to close this hour with some actual sort of scenarios to discuss. But we would love to hear questions or ideas or prompts that you have throughout the course of this content. But bottom line, all of those things that, thank you, Liz, for reading those out, are things that are both common practice and also real problems for kids in this age group, and sometimes even their adults, right? And so a lot of, the largest takeaway when applying a pyramid model lens to this work is that those are developmentally, common within this context. And how do we not blame the child for having that reaction in the moment, but support them with the skill to navigate that difficulty a little bit differently? And this is just, again, our PEAK team. So PEAK stands for Parent, Infant, Early Childhood. And we have the opportunity to work on pyramid models, supporting it both in Connecticut and in Maryland within their early intervention work. And you hear often from Liz and Rachel and I, and Liz Hoy is on our team now as well. Liz, we'll have to add your photo here. But all of our work is made meaningful by the evaluation team that's led by Dr. Margot Candelaria, who helps us look at data and show the impact and what else is needed within this work. So we're glad to meet you if we haven't already, and glad to know you if in this work. Again, trying to sort of spread the gap between those that are very new to pyramid and sort of engaging in this as a first step, and those that know it well, and our resources to others within their own settings around these practices. But if this isn't new to you, this is the visual of the pyramid, and it's really a social public health approach to promoting social and emotional competence in infants and young children. And it was born in the hallways and classrooms of Head Starts and group-based childcare, but since has really delved into anywhere where very young kids are. So there's supports within pyramid model for homes. There's supports for family home childcare. There's supports within early intervention, and all of it is really around how do we help adults understand the need of children within this age group with respect to their social and emotional domain, and support both kids and those adults to be successful. And all of that is starting with the workforce. So how do we give adults the guidance, the confidence, the techniques and regulation skills to apply these approaches in the moment? Principles of that model are here. And again, this is very familiar to many of you, but wanted to ground us in this before we build content over the course of this hour. The pyramid model rests on a foundation of inclusivity, cultural responsivity, and anti-racist, anti-bias practices, both in intention and also in data, really looking at how do we dismantle, racist and bias responses to children's behavior and ensure when we're talking about universal practices, we are really universally applying those. Social emotional development is foundational for other developmental domains. So this idea of when we think about, kindergarten readiness or school readiness, we're we're not just thinking about literacy and sort of academic skills, but recognizing that regulation, and someone called it out in their example of problems for kids. Regulation is sort of the key for onboarding all of those other skills. So starting with social emotional tasks first. That children need to be taught social emotional skills. So, the same way that we would never expect a child to learn a language without adult guidance, learn to read, develop their motor skills. And we'll talk a lot about this today. This is sort of intentional teaching of practices to, again, not blame a child for not having that on board yet, but help them build that skill. The next bullet you see is sort of the mantra of the pyramid model, and that's behavior is communication. So when we see, evidence of difficulty or evidence of maybe a problem not solved in the moment, and therefore the, tantrum or whatever sort of behavioral consequence there is, how do we not punish, label, blame, but see it as as communicating a need? What do we understand about this particular child and what they need to sort of navigate the same moment in a different way? And that all of those practices are focused on adult behavior. So everybody thinks about young kids and challenging behavior when they think about pyramid, and that is sort of our port of entry into this work. But all of the strategies are really adult focused, and the good thing about that is that it's easier for us to change our own behavior than someone else's. So we start with that. All of it's really around educating and coaching adults and caregivers and parents to understand and respond differently. This topic today of supporting problem-solving skills within young children really falls into tier two. So we've done a number of different webinar topics so far that fall into the domain of tier one, which is the blue sort of a foundation of the pyramid. And that's focusing on environments and relationships and sort of all of the sort of universal setups to sort of enable a child to be successful. And tier two, which is explained further here, is really applying the intentional teaching, sometimes universally, sometimes in small groups, sometimes individually, but the sort of the practice of teaching how to recognize emotion, so emotional identification, how to regulate or respond or release that emotion in a way that is acceptable for the environment and setting. How to have positive friendship skills. And, kids can be friends with people of all ages. I was joking at pickup yesterday that my 4-year-old was, approaching adults and teenagers, asking them to play. So friendship skills can apply with peers. It can apply with adults. But what are their skills to sort of navigate and interact with others? And then the one that we'll delve into today is problem solving skills. And that, again, all of those things are things that need to be taught. And the great thing about that is that you're all in settings to really naturally do that. And much of the hour today is going to be around those strategies. How do we know what to do and know how to sort of pepper it throughout your day or interaction? Again, to just sort of encounter problems together and model and monitor sort of the problem solving so that it goes from adult led to sort of child led. So again, this idea that children just don't just learn problem solving. It's sort of a higher level understanding of it, first encountering the problem and having the regulation to sort of think through a solution. And so a lot of that has to be taught. But the good thing is that, like anything else, there's strategies to do that. And that so much of this has to do with emotional regulation, both before, during, and after. How they're perceived by peers and their peer relationships comes on very early, that you see sort of clusters and reactions and sort of labels around this. And so the importance of supporting positive peer problem solving and resolution of conflict when there has been conflict between peers based on problem solving or lack of problem solving. Of course, a reduction in challenging behavior, because challenging behavior often shows up if a problem is solved in a way that didn't meet the child's request or expectation, right? If the solution was, okay, if you're both fighting over the toy, then the toy goes away and the child tantrums, that's sort of a natural response. Um, and that all of this is really built upon the child's brain development and co-regulation. So their ability to onboard, patterns and understanding of rules and sort of all of those sort of brain tasks that are happening within their little bodies, and their ability to regulate again around emotions. I don't think you'll ever hear us do a topic around pyramid that doesn't have regulation somewhere um, in the lecture, because it's one thing to know a strategy, but to be able to use it in the moment at the adult level or the child level, there needs to be regulation on board. And the importance of allowing for problem solving to happen in a range of ways, supporting diverse learners, whether it be respect to culture or temperament or language within those settings. And with that, um, I believe I'm passing this on to Rachel.
Yes. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah.
So, as Kate has said a couple of times, the cool thing about this is that problem solving skills can be taught. And NCPMI has a number of resources that can help provide some structure to teaching problem solving skills. And so we're definitely gonna talk about some of those things. And we're also just gonna talk about how you can sort of engage in problem solving discussions like in the moment as things are coming up. But we'll start here, and want to just point out, as with all skills that we're trying to teach children, and this is true of skills that we would want that if we were trying to learn as an adult, this would be true as well. The best time to teach them is when children are calm, right? We can't teach a problem solving skill like when the problem comes up. It's like when a child is dysregulated is not the time when we're like, we're going to learn how to do star breathing. Okay, here we go. That's just not that just doesn't work very well. And so we want to sort of think about, times when there's opportunity, when, children are calm and there are no problems at this moment, and sort of create some of these planned opportunities to help children start to learn this process. So a number of things are being put in the chat. These are some of the resources that are linked on this slide here. And so it starts with a social story. The We Can Be Problem Solvers is a social story that can be downloaded and printed from NCPMI. And that's something that, for example, you could read during circle time to really start the conversation. And then there are four primary problem solving steps that NCPMI kind of, again, provides some structure around for us to teach children, which are first, identifying the problem. So, number one, what is the problem? Number two is to think of some solutions, right? So, like, let's just generate some solutions to the problem. Number three is thinking about what would happen, like what would happen if I used some of these different solutions? What would it be like for me? What would it be like for the other person? Is this a safe solution in this scenario that I'm in? And then the fourth step is giving that solution a try. So you, again, sort of can start with reading the social story and then teaching the problem solving steps. The solution kit includes as it sounds like, solutions, different solutions to problems that children can try. And so it's things like wait and take turns, or select a timer, or share, share, play together, say, please stop. So these are all individual cards that can be printed and put, in a container that becomes sort of your solution kit. And so it can be really helpful, if you're trying to help facilitate a child in walking through these problem solving steps, when you're on that third step of like coming up with some different solutions. The second step of coming up with some different solutions, these are some examples. So these are things where, again, if a child's having a hard time, you can say, well, okay, well, let's get the solution kit. Let's pull that out. Let's look and see what are some different solutions that might be applicable in, the situation that we're in. And then throughout the classroom, as I'm sure for those of you who have been around Pyramid Model for anything more than about 1 minute, you know that there are lots of visuals to support these different things. And so also using visuals, like using the solution kit or having the problem solving steps posted in the classroom can really help cue children. And one of the things that Kate mentions often, and it's really stuck with me, is it's also for the adults, right? Like we talk about those visuals being for the children, but it also reminds the adults in the room of what we're trying to do. So it helps give the children an idea of the steps, and it also reminds you, oh yeah, we're doing this thing where we're trying to help kids learn these problem solving steps. Here they are posted. I can remember to help walk children through this. Giving opportunities to practice, and we're going to look at, we have a couple of short videos to show, but giving opportunities to practice, kind of like setting that up again, where it's kind of low stakes. Maybe there isn't a ton of, the emotions aren't real high. You can sort of construct a situation where there's opportunity to problem solve. Another thing that can be really helpful is just modeling solutions in problems that you're running into. We talk a lot about in Pyramid Model, kind of like the adult like narrating their process. And this is a good place to do that too. And so again, like when we're talking about regulation, we encourage the adult, if they're, having a feeling and need to kind of help themselves regulate, to say that, oh, I notice I'm starting to get a little bit frustrated. Let me step away and like take just a minute to help calm my body down. I'm going to take a few big breaths and then I'm going to come back and, we'll figure this out. In the same way, really encouraging, when you as an adult in the room are running into a problem, to really narrate your process, narrate what it is that you're doing, how you're sort of thinking through the problem in an intentional way. Really, as with all things, trying to reinforce when children, start trying to use the problem solving steps. And as with all things, it takes some time to become kind of for it to become integrated, right? For it to just become part of like how children do things in your classroom. But really reinforcing when you see children trying to do that, or, grabbing the solution kit or suggesting some of the different solutions that you're talking through, and really trying to keep practicing with all things. It takes some repetition. And again, it takes a little while for it to become integrated. But it also helps, I think, having this structure helps slow things down a bit. And that can help with regulation as well. And so, I know that as I've talked about problem solving, I've given a couple of examples, sort of thinking about regulation here as well. The two are really related. It's really hard. I can't tell you how many times I've said to my own children, it's hard to solve a problem when we're so dysregulated, right? So like those things are really related and they help each other out. So being regulated helps you to be a better problem solver. And when you're using problem solving effectively, it supports regulation. So those two skills are, definitely see them sort of intertwined at times. So we can go to the next slide. So those are just, again, that's a handful of very like structured resources that you can use in your classroom. They can all be printed, and those are all in the chat if you want to pull those up. And I want to emphasize, I think something that comes up with some frequency as we're talking about almost anything related to Pyramid Model is really trying to see this as part of your, sort of regular classroom activities. And it doesn't have to always be something extra on top of all of the other things. So, just doing just having access to typical things that young children have access to offer a lot of everyday opportunities for practicing problem solving skills. So things like puzzles, or obstacle courses, STEM activities offer a lot of opportunity for problem solving. And so I think sometimes when we initiate conversations around problem solving, a lot of times what comes up are like, like either difficult peer situations, or just kind of like difficult behavior, as sort of like examples of problem solving. But we use very like cognitive problem solving in everyday life as well, both children and through our adulthood. And so I think it's important to remember that too, that certainly there are those examples of relational problem solving or things like that, but also like some of these more kind of cognitive or motor activities also give a lot of opportunity to practice problem solving and really, again, really offer an opportunity to practice some regulation. So, like, you watch a child who's really struggling with a puzzle, and that feels that is a problem, right? They're having a problem and working towards solving that. And so supporting them and kind of maintaining their regulation as they're working on that and encouraging them to continue working on that problem is, again, a skill that they'll use both within your classroom setting right now, but also something that will be supportive to them for the rest of their lives. So we've got, really like kind of uh, structured support from NCPMI. We've got some thoughts about kind of like everyday activities that can support problem solving. Also, as with nearly all things, books can also be really helpful. Um, so these specific books that are listed here, Beautiful Oops, Jabari Tries, and Solutions for Cold Feet and Other Little Problems are all good examples of books that really, very sort of specifically support problem solving. And also, though, something that we nearly always talk about when we talk about books is almost every book can be used to support things like problem solving skills, friendship skills, etc. You almost don't read a children's book where there isn't some sort of problem that you can identify. So again, these are good examples. If you want to look for something that's really specific to problem solving, but also just encourage you to, if you have some favorite books or books that that children in your classroom really enjoy, to look for places where you might be able to kind of like pull out some problems and help children think through solutions to those problems. We want to just acknowledge that, problem solving skills, there's a developmental continuum, right? And I think just wanting to make sure that we have a sense that what problem solving looks like in infants and toddlers and the way in which we're trying to sort of scaffold that skill is different than when we're talking about preschoolers. And so really, with much younger children, with infants and toddlers, there's a lot of attention and kind of effort around using co-regulation with the caregiver and the caregiver offering some interpretation of what's happening. Right at that point, an infant or toddler is maybe not going to be able to name or identify what that problem is. And so it's really much more reliant on the adult to articulate, hey, it looks like we have a problem here, or there's something that's going on. Solutions look much simpler, and again, more sort of like adult directed. So, for example, just offering a really simple choice. And with all of that, the adult really focusing on, again, like identifying both the emotions of what's happening, what they're seeing with the child, and also sort of trying to understand the intention of what the child is doing or indicating. But then as you move into preschool age, the children become much more kind of like active in that problem solving process in terms of, for example, being able to identify the problem. So if you have two preschoolers, who are in a disagreement and you ask, what's going on here? It seems like there's a problem. They're gonna be able to tell you, right? We both want the truck, or he knocked my blocks down, or whatever happened. And they're also much they're also able to start generating solutions. So rather than the adult necessarily needing to be the person to, give some simple choices, children can really be involved in identifying some solutions. And again, this is where potentially that solution kit can be really helpful because it has, concrete ideas and just sort of like a handful of them, right? There aren't like 25 solutions, but just a handful that kids can kind of get familiar with over time. Here are some options that can help us work through this. And they can participate in sort of like starting to negotiate a solution to the problem. And so, again, I think one of the things that is always helpful as adults is making sure that our expectations are in line with where children are developmentally. And so, in this particular skill, I think just acknowledging, the difference in what this looks like in infants and toddlers versus what it will look like in preschoolers. So again, these are sort of the steps that you want to help children work through. Really being able to articulate the problem, being able to identify, sort of like brainstorm what are some solutions around that. How do those solutions feel? And again, this is a place where the adults can really help children start thinking about how does it feel for me and how might it feel for the other child, right? If there's one truck and the solution is I take the truck, I might feel great. That's maybe not going to leave Liz feeling very good when I take her truck. So the adult can really help, start to facilitate some of that empathy and kind of taking others' perspectives. And then sort of like with all of that, kind of narrowing down something to try, right? So like we have these 3 sort of possible solutions that would make sense in this scenario. Maybe 1 or 2 offer an opportunity for both of us to feel okay about it if there are 2 of us in this problem, or if it's just me, having this problem, this offers an opportunity for me to feel okay about it, and so let's go ahead and give it a try. Something that I like about this as well is that it really normalizes the possibility that it might take more than one try to come to a solution. And I like that because that is just reality. Sometimes we try something and it just doesn't quite work, or it doesn't quite feel good, or, it feels different than we thought that it was going to. And so I think that when you sort of look at it in this really stepwise fashion, it can maybe both like take some of the emotion out of it if something doesn't work, but again, also just normalizes like, okay, that maybe didn't work, but we've got some other ideas, right? We had some other ideas. We can kind of go back to those ideas that we generated and try something else. So that's really trying to kind of keep those 4 steps in mind, I think is helpful. So this next slide, we're going to show just a short clip. And really, this teacher is kind of like, again, sort of like creating an opportunity to do some problem solving within her classroom. And so it offers, the idea is that like it offers you as the teacher an opportunity to do some intentional teaching. We have here within a setting that is at least somewhat controlled by you, at least the setup is, right? We don't always know exactly how it's going to unfold, but you can kind of like set it up and have some thoughts about, what you want to highlight or how you want to help facilitate some of that learning. So I'll stop talking and we'll watch this short clip.
Whitney. That could be the volume of your voice, yes. So how loud and how low it is. But volume we are going to talk about is the space the space can take. How many are you? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I have how many containers? 2. So what can we do?
Share.
Oh. Share, I love that. But how are we going to share?
We take turns, so that Liam, me,
That could be a solution. What other solutions can we have?
How about make some work what I need to do?
Wonderful idea. I love it. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah.
Remember that we
Make
only
one
need to
put the
check.
vase and make one put the container.
Okay.
But we want to work on
So you want the vase and you want the vase? So now we have another problem. How can we resolve that problem?
If you take this,
Bob, I need one of you take this one and the other one is going to take
we
this.
can take the vase.
But you want the vase and she wants the vase. So how can we resolve that?
You can take turns.
Well, take turns, that means that I have to do it twice, but I'm not going to do it twice because we can measure just one time how many cups of water are going to be here. So one of you take this one and the other one take this one. But how are we going to decide what group is going to work with this?
Eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
Do you want to do the eeny, meeny, miny, moe?
Yeah, Spanish.
Emily, do you think that would be fair? We do the eeny, miny, moe? Okay, I'm going to do it in the Spanish way. Tin, marín, de dos, tingüe, titirima, titirigüe, chino, marrano, güe. So they're going to get the base. Thank you for finding that solution, Stella. That was wonderful. And you're going to use this base. Okay, now, who is going to start? Are you agreed that they start first? I love your idea because I think that's fair. You got the base and they can start. You go first. So what are we going to do? And how are you going to manage that? Because what are you going to do is you're going to put 1 cup of water and you have to pour it here and you're going to count. So how are you going to do that? So
I don't care. But I don't care if he goes.
also are you going to take turns putting water? Okay. But before we do that, we are going to make a prediction. Okay, Stella, so put 1 cup of water and you put it here. So we count. 1. Now it's Liam's turn.
Stick.
I love the way you're passing and taking turns. Following our Jesus rule. That's awesome. Being good friends. 5. Okay, so let's go give it a try.
Okay, one try of one.
I hold it here. So let's go down 1. Now it's with done. You can see, let's go move a little bit. So group A, so that means Stella and Liam. Their prediction was 4, but they have 9 cups from that container. Emily, so your prediction was correct or incorrect? Incorrect. Okay, so we have 9. Now the group B, Whitney and Emily, your prediction was 6, and you put 4.5.
So one of the things I think that really stands out to me is as you watch the children sort of like come up with ideas, kind of midway through when they're talking about the vase, one of the girls, she's like holding the vase, like she really wants the vase, and I think the teacher says like, "What are we gonna do? You both want the vase," and she's like, "I'll have it." But then they came up with eeny, meeny, miny, moe. She didn't end up getting to keep the vase, right? She sort of lost, for lack of a better way of putting it. She lost eeny, meeny, miny, moe, and she had to give the vase to the other child. And you could tell that there was like a tiny bit of hesitance, but she did it, right? And then they just kept on moving. And so I think one of the things that's cool about when children get to be involved in generating solutions to the things that they're struggling with is they're more likely to sort of like accept the solution, whatever that is. It's kind of like, you know, as adults, when someone tells us what to do, we might not be real pumped about it, but like if we came up with the same idea, we would think it was the best idea ever. It's a little bit the same with kids. And so when they're involved like that, it just makes it a little bit easier for them to kind of like follow through or accept the solution that they've come to. So that's something that really stood out to me, but I want to pause and just see if there was anything that stood out to other folks. If you want to, you know, put it in the chat or come off mute, we'd love to hear from you if there's anything that you want to highlight as well.
I'll share that.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, I particularly like the phrase, and I've used it more and more, is, do you think that's fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, and because I think you can extrapolate that to a lot of different things that you talk about in terms of problem solving and, just things that are going around in the classroom writ large. So I think that I was really happy to hear that she used that. And again, like you said, the children are, they get it. It is fair. Like when you've kind of gone
Yeah.
through that process and everybody has been involved. I think that was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I was just going to share that I really liked how she used that eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And reflecting back, I used to do that when I was in elementary school with my friends, and that's how we would choose who would take the next turn. And
Yeah.
so my kids, they love rock, paper, scissors, and that's
Mm.
how they choose whose turn it is.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such a good example too of like knowing your children and knowing your classroom. And so, in your classroom, right, it might not be eeny, meeny, miny, mo, but it might be rock, paper, scissors. And in someone else's classroom, it might be some other way that sort of like the culture of the classroom has determined that this is one of the ways that we kind of like work things out. I love that. Oh, I see one more comment in the chat. Let me see. This made complete sense to me. I love the engagement and problem solving and verbal praise. I wonder about any shift in strategy if when there's one child who is struggling behaviorally or emotionally with decisions and ideas of another child. Yeah, Christina, I think that's a really fair point. Like we saw it go very well. It was very smooth. Everyone was in agreement. And it went well. And I think, as I think about that question, Rebecca, one thing that stands out is your comment about the question about does it seem fair? And sort of wondering about, I think in my head, I would maybe be wondering about, is it that it isn't seeming fair to this child, or is it that it seems fair, but they just still don't like it? And maybe kind of like trying to suss that out a little bit. If it's not seeming fair, let's talk about that. What doesn't feel fair? Is there something we need to tweak? If it feels fair and it's just like, it's a bummer to not get what we want, then it's maybe addressing that, right? Like even just a validation of that. I can see that you don't like that. It's hard. It's hard when the solution maybe isn't exactly what you want. I wonder, sort of like how to help that. I would wonder how to help the child kind of like tolerate that part. I don't know if folks have other ideas about how to handle that, because you're right, like it's not always going to go beautifully.
I completely co-sign that, Rachel. I think this is where the sort of the thread of all of the tier two strategies like interplay, right? So it's, if there's peer interaction where there is problem solving that isn't, meeting the emotional needs of a child at that time, how do you help them label and really set emotion?
I wondered if she had intentionally paired the children together. A strategy that I always use is peer partnering with, the one little girl who came up with the ideas, and she was really loud and she was really, she was in it. She seemed pretty strong in those skills, and the little boy didn't really say anything. And I wondered if that was an intentional pairing to kind of get him to be involved in it without having to come up with his own solutions at first. And then as he practices it, you can move along and let him do some more of the talking and actions.
I'm just aware of time, so I'm gonna keep us moving just a little bit. I'm gonna kind of wrap up this section and then pass it to Liz. So just another sort of thought about this is really considering if you feel like there aren't kind of like a lot of natural opportunities that you're seeing in your classroom to practice some of these skills kind of like in real life scenarios, you can kind of create the problem, right? You can problematize things that are happening in your classroom in a positive way, right? It's not having a problem is not the same as having conflict. So I think that that part's like important to recognize. We're not talking about, see how much conflict you can create, but you can sort of like generate, oh, this is a problem. How can we work through it together? And again, sometimes that also really it's a scenario where there isn't heightened emotion because you're just sort of like establishing this as a problem and kind of like, let's be scientists and work through it together. And so that can be a really good way to practice these skills as well. I know that we have one more video, but I'm wondering if I should just go ahead and pass to Liz and we can talk about some of the scenarios. Does that look okay to you?
We can
Okay.
always disseminate the video. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so this is just the at-home version of the We Can Be Problem Solvers. There's a classroom version and an at-home version. So we can link these skills with what's happening at home. And we can definitely put the link to that in the chat as well. I'm seeing a comment. Rebecca used to use the phrase, you get what you get and you don't get upset, but to support the fact that it can be upsetting not to get what you want. You've stopped using it or explain it's okay to be upset. I really love that. That phrase, I heard that phrase so much when I was a teacher. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. One of my children's teachers use the phrase, you get what you get and you appreciate it. And I liked that a lot more. So that I appreciate that shift in the language because we do get upset and it is okay to get upset. So the next little piece is just a couple scenarios that probably you've experienced in your lifetime. The first one is a toddler trying to put together a puzzle and it won't fit, so they cry and throw the puzzle piece. I laughed when I read this one because one of my children was an avid puzzler when he was little, and also one of those children who presented challenges within his preschool settings. And that was one of the ways that we practiced problem solving and regulation persistence when he was young, was just simple, even when he was like a toddler, like 2 years old, practicing the phrase, turn it around. Every time I would say the same thing every time he would get upset about a puzzle piece, turn it around. And he started using that phrase and it just stuck. And so he got a lot of opportunity to practice that persistence and really just small changes can solve a big problem. So the pyramid model connection here is emotional literacy and persistence are some of the earlier problem solving foundations that we build upon as children get older, and help when they're little, we have to help them think through those things, give them the language, that didn't work, or let's turn it around. This seems frustrating. You can't get it in, it won't fit. Just giving them the language to kind of explain what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. And it really does help build their emotional literacy to understand how they're feeling when things like frustration occur. And then also give them some strategies to solve problems as they arise. And then just a little bit of a discussion point. I think it's really important to think about how often we kind of intervene before it's necessary, especially with young children, and especially when there's multiple children playing together. We don't want physical interactions between children when they're having disagreements. So we tend to step in a little too quickly. And especially at a young age, it gives them children an opportunity to practice their skills, and we can really see where they are with those skills. So we're able to scaffold in an individual way. It's hard to know where children are and what skills they have if we don't let them kind of use those skills in their day-to-day adventures. Did Does anyone have any thoughts about this, the puzzle frustration? One of my favorite ways to approach young children with frustration is to just model it as the adult. And some of the previous slides where we were talking about creating problems that we can then work through solving. I think it's also important to create them with the adults that are around so that there is a model. They're able to hear that language come from the adults and see adults work through problems as you narrate what's going on. So it's not just always between the children. They have to see us do it before they're able to do it.
Well, and I think, Liz, both that and this sort of scenario right here is such a good example of like intentionality in the adult response helps the child like maintain the task and practice working through it versus someone that says, oh, if you're going to throw the puzzle, we're going to put it away and bring you to something else that is easier for you or whatever it might be. And both are well-intentioned adults in the moment. But when you don't help them through that moment and over the hill of frustration to the other side of sort of success and regulation, then they're not going to be able to do it when they're asked to do so in larger ways.
Yes, I love the comment in the chat that about using puzzles to practice dealing with frustration. And Jessica says that a mantra that was in her classroom was, if it doesn't work, try again, which I really like that. Persistence is something that I think we don't talk about enough with young children. It is, we've got to develop it, and it is a skill and it needs to be practiced. This little vignette is one that I think we saw earlier in the chat several times. Just conflict over wanting the same material in a classroom setting. I think children have very frequently want the same toy, or they see someone, they didn't want the toy until they see someone else playing with it and it looks like a really great time and now they want it. And if they don't have the skills to ask for a turn or, to even recognize that what they're feeling is that they want that toy, it can lead to some challenging situations. So it's really important to think through a pyramid model lens, thinking about this as an opportunity to implement tier 1 prevention strategies. Something as simple as making sure that there are enough of the high value items in the classroom, the things that most children want to play with more frequently, so that there are opportunities for more than one child at a time to have a chance to explore those materials. Using visual turn-taking supports is an option. Some of the time we can use like timers. If it's an item everybody wants to play with, we can set a limit and use that as a visual to understand that it's the next person's turn. Reinforce behavior expectations, teach the behavior expectations ahead of time. So if another opportunity where you can create a problem and teach what it looks like if everybody wants the same material, and then giving positive praise when children are sharing, I think really builds that confidence that they're doing something well and they want to keep doing it again. And then I think that the key insight is a good one. If the same problem keeps happening, it's probably not a child issue. It is likely an environment issue. So again, back to those tier 1 prevention strategies and environmental considerations. And I'm just aware of the time and want to leave a few seconds to think about this reflection. And would love to have people share out or put in the chat one thing from today that not only you could begin to implement, but maybe it has you thinking like, I could do this more, or I want to try to, create a situation where I can intentionally teach these skills. Mich Melissa, I love that. Thinking deeply about if the same behavior keeps happening, it could be an environmental issue. I think that is pyramid model at its very core. We always have to go back to tier one and ensure that our environments are appropriate and set up in a way that is helpful to children and teaches them the skills that they need. Sometimes that means, going back to tier one repeatedly and just being aware that if, not everything is a child issue. Gail says, love the problem solver pics to post. There are many resources similar to that I think adding visuals to the classroom is very helpful for young children. Intentionally setting up situations for cooperation and problem solving is on my teacher radar ASAP. Will do tomorrow. I love that. I call it planned sabotage, Beth, and where you plan out an activity and intentionally sabotage it so that it creates a problem that the children then have to work through. And before we end, I will say that one of the most fun activities that teaches kind of like turn taking and problem solving that I have ever done is paint mixing with either painting with partners where they each get a color and, they're supposed to paint something, but they have to figure out how to paint it together, or paint mixing where one wants to go first, the other one wants to go first. They make a new color together, and you can show them that doesn't matter who goes first, the end result's the same. It makes the same color. The children really like that one. It's a sensory experience, it's fun, and they get to share and practice their skills. And then this is, I think we could put the link in the chat, just a playlist of past Lunch and Learns that we've done supporting pyramid model practices. And we can also put the link to register for the next one in there.
Yep, which will be May 19th at noon. We'll have evening offerings for that as well in both English and Spanish. And that will be around supporting transitions. And it's a time of year where transitions are going to be coming up with a change in classroom or summer schedules, new places, and transitions happen in small ways and routines all the time. So we'll delve into that topic next time. But we know it's after 1, so thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.